Hello, and thank you all for coming out to Fountain Street Church today for a little practice in grace and joy, because grace is not something that you can do by yourself. Being a steward of it or accepting it takes work and takes practice. We're going to do a little bit of that today. Grace is my favorite and least favorite thing about the Christian religion and about being a human in general, because there's this story as old as Genesis, right, that humans are these kind of flawed, sinful creatures who can only be redeemed through a great sacrifice of love. But if you take, maybe 8 steps back and squint a little bit at the same story, it can also be really freeing, because it says, well, human beings are not perfect. We mess up, we make mistakes that hurt other people and disappoint ourselves, but there's still this model here to try to always look for the joy and the delight in the things around us and in the other sort of creatures here, despite all of what we may consider to still be flaws. So, as we start our hour of worship here today, I want to invite you to bring all of yourself into this space. You're welcome here. You're appreciated. I know that you all have other things you could do with this hour of your lives, but you have been drawn into a spiritual experience here with the rest of us. I know that personally I am learning a new job and trying to cook and clean and launder and plan a wedding that's about 3 weeks away. Right? Wishful thinking. I have so many things that I feel like I should be doing that I have been trying very hard to hold on to grace myself. Last weekend, I had my sister call me and be like, do you want to go out to brunch? And I'm like, oh, but it's Fountain Street time. And also, I found myself froze by the door with my shoes on, looking from the messy pots in the kitchen to all the laundry everywhere, to a pile of things for work that I was supposed to have finished, to some wedding-related accoutrements that didn't fit that were supposed to go back. And I just kind of froze there. And I was like, I can't decide if I want to go to brunch today. And then I started to cry, and I said, I'm crying about brunch. I'm crying about brunch. I'm standing there, and all I can think is, what a big dum-dum. I am crying about brunch. And luckily, my lovely fiancé, Steven, here, found me there and tried to snuggle some sense back into me. But he's like, what's wrong, babe? And all I can say is, I'm crying about brunch. But as soon as I say it, there's that crack, and that's where grace comes in. And suddenly there was a third unexpected option. There was brunch. There was all the work that you do to try to prove that you're this efficient, moral, upstanding citizen. And then there was grace. So, as we do our practice here today, I would invite you to take in that spirit of grace. And the kind of grace that we're going to be talking about is a little bit more like the theologian's quote that laughter is the closest thing to the grace of God, or what the writer Anne Lamott calls spiritual WD-40, where you go from clenched to plop to breathing again, where you get your sense of humor back, which is a miracle. She also calls it a spiritual supernova. I've found that it can be that powerful to let down your defenses, your judgment, your control, to try to seek out that spirit of joy and delight instead, toward yourself as well as toward others. So as we move into what's probably a very familiar hymn for all of you guys, we'll be doing Amazing Grace not once but twice today. And as you go through those verses, I would ask you to just kind of breathe your way into it and take a minute with the words and try to see if you can feel some of that grace today that you may have, grown up singing, or you may have always kind of turned the radio when it came on, but I think it's a beautiful thing we can use today. And as we prepare, I would just quote 1 Peter chapters 4, roughly verses 8 through 10, roughly. And if we could all try to, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms.
Well, she already said just about everything in terms of welcome. This is, in fact, Fountain Street Church, formerly Fountain Street Baptist Church, but a presence for progressive religion for almost 150 years on this very spot in Grand Rapids. During the summer, we meet in this space for 2 really good reasons. We don't have as many people on Sunday, and it's better to feel bigger in a smaller space than smaller in a bigger space, I think. And it's cooler in here. Our sanctuary, which is over 90 years old, was built when people were heartier souls and brought their fans and their handkerchiefs and endured both hotter and longer Sunday services. I want to point out, though, that it's sometimes tempting in a small room to think we're just one little happy family in a little town in Michigan, and yet I know, having listened this morning, that we have people from as far away as Norway with us today. We have, Stephen, you have near ancestors who came from Armenia. Do I understand that? Chances are every continent that is inhabited has a presence here in this room today. Probably a dozen or more sovereign states, dozens of states of the Union. Someone from Atlanta, Georgia is here. Someone from Maryland is here. I am a son of Maryland. I know that there are people who are born in Texas here today, and I'm the father of a Texas-born person. So the reality is that even in this small room, in this small company, the world is present. And in all of its glory, in all of its complexity, and all of its confusion, we are here today to lift up a certain kind of hope that somehow, no matter how different we are nonetheless all on this boat together. And that we'd better start learning how to pull in the same direction if we expect to get to the other side. There are lots of things you can know about Fountain Street Church. Some of those things are printed in your order of worship. Others can be found by talking to any member of this church, because we all like to talk about how great a place this is. Next week, your speaker will be none other than our music director, who will be speaking from her perspective as a gardener, as much, if not more, than as a musician. And the Sunday after that, we will be hosting yours truly as the speaker as we conclude our summer chapel series. That means the Sunday after Labor Day, if you're still interested, we'll be back in the big room. Bring your fans, bring your handkerchiefs. It will be worth being there. I now would like to invite Ms. Meredith to lead us in our responsive reading.
Good morning. Please join with me in the responsive reading in your bulletin. The alphabet of grace is full of sibilants, sounds that can't be shouted but only whispered. The sounds of bumblebees and wind and lovers in the dark, of whitecaps hissing up flat over the glittering sand, and cars on wet roads, of crowds hushed in vast and vaulted places. The sound of your own breathing. I believe that in sibilance, life is trying to tell us something. Ghosts, dreams, faces, the waking up and eating and working of life are trying to tell us something, to take us somewhere. At the heart of reality, who would have guessed it? There is a room for dying and being born again.
Singing together in harmony.
sound of voices three. This is the sound of all of us, singing with love and the will to trust. Leave the rest behind, it'll turn to dust. This is the sound of all of us. This is the sound of all of us. Ooh, ooh,
So I was visiting someone in the hospital yesterday. All is well, or will be soon. And the person I was visiting said, I'm very fortunate that I paid attention to the symptoms. I didn't have a heart attack, but I felt a warning. And not just once. It was the second time. How many of us have wondered about whether that pain, that itch, that cough was a sign? If you get older, you think it a lot more often, don't you? I lift this up as we enter a time of prayer and meditation and even silence, because in the last few weeks, the nation has felt some pains. Something that you can't quite dismiss as being just a little something. Perhaps our spiritual heart has a blockage or two. Perhaps it's time to pretend it isn't just an ache in our arm or a muscle spasm. Perhaps it's time to realize that we do have some blockages in our spiritual heart as a nation. I lift this up because we've sung Amazing Grace, which, as some of you know, was written by a man named John Newton, who in the 18th century came to the realization that his life as a slave trader was no longer deniable, that he could not pretend it wasn't an evil. And he felt as though somehow the Spirit of God came and kind of smacked him in the chest like a heart attack would and told him to wake up before his sin killed him. And he counted that moment a gift. Who of us would count a heart attack as a gift unless it took us to the hospital and gave us 20 more years of life? So I want us to look as we enter into this time of prayer for the gifts we did not want but nonetheless saved us. The ones that informed us of something we didn't want to know but needed to know. The news that was unwelcome but prevented us from driving off a personal cliff or saying the unretraceable word. The harm we could have done to ourselves, to someone we loved. Those horrible moments when the truth hit us in the chest and kept us from dying. O Ancient of Days, Thou who art from everlasting to everlasting, nameless and ever present, in the words of my mouth and the meditations of your hearts, felt in the breezes, in the sibilants, in the winds of the day. We crave the unwanted gift of truth. That we should be struck dumb, struck blind, struck down, if need be, to be roused to the dangers, to our own responsibilities, to our errors. Oh, we may not be bound for some dreadful eternity of hellfire, but does that mean we have to overlook the hell we visit upon each other in this all too brief and fleeting life? No. Stay our hand from the folly, even if it means you have to twist our wrists until they hurt. Hit us in the mouth if thou must, that we would not say the word that harms. Cause us to fall down before we would collide and cause others to hurt. Give us the gift we do not want, that as people and as communities and as a nation, we may arouse and awake and become what we say we want to be, even as we try so hard to avoid the responsibility it takes to become that. Ancient One, present in every hiss and every breath, give us what we do not want, but so desperately need. Upon these things, we offer ourselves now in silence, mindful that it contains also those who are here in suffering and in loss, those who are enduring grief and sorrow. And in that silence, let us care for those around us, known and unknown, whose lives are burdened, that we may leave this hour ready to serve the greater and holier good. And so let us pray. And to this prayer we say amen and amen. The word grace, of which you are going to speak in great detail, has its origins in the word gratia, which is like thank you. It has its relationship to the Greek word charis, as in charismatic. And it has a connection to that word that represents communion in the liturgical churches, Eucharist, the good gift. The irony is that we do not do communion here. We are not charismatics who bubble over in ecstatic tongues, although if you feel so moved, feel free. We don't even like to sing very much for fear that people might think we're actually animated. Someone said of our tradition in the liberal church, we're not good at singing hymns because we're too busy reading ahead to see if we agree with the words.
Thank you for your offering. There's grace there, as Fred was telling us. I know I sometimes feel, let's say, politically overwhelmed and rather small against the problems of the world, but being able to give some money into the basket is a gift. And to this church, which I love, is a gift. And to local causes that I care about, to feel like even when my hands are let's say, more nervous and panicky at home, doing a lot of this. My hands can also be out in the world through that. And so does what our other minister, Jason, likes to say about if you don't have any money to give that day, or if you're not giving money that day, to just hold the basket and give an intention of what you want to be in the world or what you want to do in the world that week instead. So if you're following along in our order of service, it may seem like we're going into a reading, but we actually are going to pause a little bit in this offertory space, since it is the grace space of the service, as Fred so nicely told us. And I would like to ask you all for a second offering, this time of your attention and your goodwill. Because you see, I am mostly drawn to grace, or the way that I like to express that is through art. I am a poet and a writer and a singer and a painter and a drawer and a dancer and a whatever else I have to do to sort of point at all the beauty in the world. But do we have any other fellow creatives in the room? I know we do. You may experience that moment of lack of grace with yourself once you've attempted to do something, and you go, oh, this is prop. A little picture of a dandelion. That's what I got. This is what came out. And I know that when I do my art making is one of my chances that I really want to reach for grace and really wish that whatever I'm creating gets translated and that people would see a little bit of the beauty or the joy that I noticed in the world and tried to put in it. So I have a couple little baskets of little art that I've made that I'm frankly somewhat embarrassed about, and have always just really wished that it could be received in a graceful moment and have a little home for a while and have someone to just kind of look at it and say, maybe that could be beautiful. So, as we pass the baskets back out, if you would kindly take something that you're hopefully at least a little bit drawn to and give it a little home for a minute, that would be grace for me. I have some stewards for this. Ah, yes, the long, occasionally uncomfortable silences of grace. Thank you. I appreciate that. As I said, that was grace for me, and if you are an art judger like I am, then maybe that can be grace for you as well. I would also like to offer you then my little sort of pep song for the moments when I am trying to create something of beauty or to share something that I've seen of beauty with other people. And worrying about whether it will be well received or whether it's enough. I found a very cute little folk song once from the singer Chris Delmhorst, so this will be our reading. Today I went flying in my favorite patch of sky. I circled and I circled above the world so high, and I thought to myself, what a lovely, lovely thing to be up here with the clouds, to be flying right out loud on these little wings, little wings. But then I met a 747, then he knocked me right out of the sky. Oh, and then he landed there beside me. Oh, and then he looked me in the eye. He said, I don't know why you even bother. I don't know why you even try. I don't know where you hope to get to. Don't know how you hope to fly on these little wings, little wings. Well, I don't want to be a jet airliner. I just want to be a little bird. I don't need to rip the skies wide open. I just want my song to be heard. I don't want to be state of the art. Don't need to get there overnight. I just want to be part of all this beauty. Want to be part of all this flight on these little wings, little wings. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah, hey. I guess you reap what you sow. I guess it's still lonely at the top. I guess it gets harder and harder to ever really know just when to stop. Grace, that's pretty much life, I think. The lyrics for my little song, I don't want to be a jet airliner, I just want to be a little bird. I don't need to rip the skies wide open, I just want my song to be heard. Or I just want to be part of all this beauty, want to be part of all this flight on these little wings. It's kind of my little quirky way of saying Amazing Grace, but I think it gets to the same sort of sentiment. when I sing, I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see, I'm not saying I got the email with all the divine answers in it or a better pair of glasses. It's just seeing your place in the middle of everything and being able to see it all as all this beauty, instead of some kind of, I don't know, kind of inconvenient mess or day-to-day traffic. It's the same world, but you're in the mindset to see the beauty in it, even at line in the supermarket, and even when you're not first in line at the supermarket, or even when you're crying about brunch. It's from our other reading, the sibilants and the little life wonders from our first reading, sounds that can't be shouted but only whispered. Or to squeeze in another quote today, it's my English degree speaking, from the poet T.S. Eliot, from his beautiful poems, The Four Quartets, about kind of checking your control at the door in favor of mystery. If you came this way, taking any route, starting from anywhere, at any time or at any season, it would always be the same. You would have to put off sense and notion. You are not here to verify, instruct yourself, or inform curiosity or carry a report. You are here to kneel where prayer has been valid. This is the cost of grace, then. You have to open up to help, to guidance, to accept that you are part of a larger. You will not understand it, predict it, or avoid the parts that you would rather. What you get is these pesky feelings, the feeling of grace. And when you feel that, will you choose grace? Will you be a steward of it, starting with yourself, starting with, from our first reading, the sound of your own breathing and the daily work of life? Because my default is I have to be more perfect. Not just perfect, but like more perfect would be great. My default is to expect an awful lot out of other people as well. Grace is work. And mind you, I do still say we need to do our best, especially where it concerns each other. Grace isn't an excuse for bad behavior or giving up hard fights. After all, I also work in the city attorney's office, and I understand the process of law. There are room for rules and justice. But there's also another quote. I can't help myself. It's both of my English degrees now. This time from John MacArthur, that says, "Grace is to law what miracles are to nature. It rises above law and accomplishes what law cannot." Here in our messy little lives, with our busy little wings, sometimes it's still hard to accept the miracle. So here I would have you pause once again to think of where you might want to make some more space in your life for grace. And if nothing immediately comes to you, you might think of what opens you up to grace, like my little pep song does for me. Or if it helps, I'll offer up yet another metaphor. I'm incorrigible. For grace, which we've already called laughter and WD-40 and a miracle. I also found it really useful to think of offering grace as simple as reaching out a glass of cool water to someone, as simple and as life-giving. All right, I already snuck most of my sermon into the other parts of the service. So I would just repeat a bit that I believe in life as a grace-filled process, and I invite you in to believe it too, of reaching and growing and being made new in totally unexpected ways. My faith comes from a felt sense of a more deep, beautiful God than I can comprehend, one to whom I feel closer in moments of grace when I'm taking in the unexpected. From our first quote of love and hospitality and being stewards of grace, and just generally letting my guard down. I would also like to extend a final invitation to all of you here today and all of our Fountain Streeters who couldn't come today, that I'm about to enter into about the biggest opportunity for grace. We did talk about motherhood with someone in the opportunity before, and let's not say that. But I am getting married in 3 weeks to Steve here, and there's going to be a lot of room for grace there as you try to become one person with another human being and build our new lives together. So we're going to have our formal wedding ceremony in his family's Armenian Orthodox church on the east side of the state. But Fountain Street is also our church home and has been our church home. So we usually go to the morning service, but we also really appreciate the 11 o'clock service and are working with some of the ministers to try to do some kind of celebration ritual of our marriage here too, with our sort of church home, and that can help maybe connect two of our services that don't always talk to each other as much as we could. I also thought it was fun after I realized that my grace quote from Peter about love, hospitality, and grace is only a couple verses after the wives submit to your husbands section, which is, another opportunity for grace. Just knowing that as we enter into that new chapter of our lives, that's going to be very important for us, and we would appreciate any and all community support, advice, wisdom, etc. And we appreciate your following with us through our own personal journeys of grace here at Fountain Street Church. Thank you.
Beautiful things out of us.